Stop living for the internet.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_Bieber. We are back to look at some Dynasty rookie ranks today, going through numbers 40 through to number 21. Michael Bolton, he wants to hear about it.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it indeed. Go check out Monday's show where I did number 80 through to number 41. Getting towards the pointy end now. Tomorrow's show will wrap up the top 20 of the Dynasty rookie ranks. But as I've said plenty of times, this is such a weird draft class in the finding where these guys are going to fit. I've got so much unknown about these guys and players drafted in spots where I wouldn't have picked them 10, 20 spots, perhaps ahead or behind where they would have gone, that some of these rankings are going to look quite strange. And I'm also really open to the idea that plenty of these guys might actually surprise and change. There's just so much uncertainty with how these players look and how they could project into the NBA that it is really quite a weird Dynasty rookie draft. Also one of the weakest overall Dynasty drafts we've had inside the last 2 years. Plus next year looks to be a little bit stronger as well. So let's take a look at these picks now. Let's start with number 40, and I've got Didi Silva, Didi Luzada, Marcelo Luzada Silva, however you want to call him. Didi is probably the way that I will call him. He has gone to the Pelicans, a Brazilian wing, 6'5" wing. Played in Brazil last year. He's 19. He's about to turn 20. Only played about 19 minutes a game last season. Averaged 11 points with 0.7 steals. Shot the three ball really well, 43% from three. And getting wings who can shoot the three, we know how important that can be in the NBA. Now, DD shot a really high volume of threes. He was a good free throw shooter as well. Decent-ish rebound rate for a 6'5" wing player. Scored at a pretty okay level on a per 36-minute basis as well. Not a guy that I think is ever going to project into a starting caliber player in the NBA, but a guy who can be, I think, like if the guy that's on the Pelicans or was on the Pelicans last season, a Darius Miller type, just a serviceable, an Etuan Moore, a serviceable wing type of a player who can play some okay-ish defense, but is more just of a sharp-shooting wing type player. So I've got Didi Luzada, Didi Silva, Marcelo, whatever his name is, at number 40. At number 39, we're looking at another international player, Davidas Savidis, who went to, I'm sure I'm pronouncing that one wrong, who went to the Detroit Pistons. Savidis doesn't appear like he's going to come across this season, but that's unknown at this point. He is 19 years of age, just turned 19, Lithuanian, 6'7" forward. Played 15 minutes a game last season, shot 36% from three, so that's an encouraging number as a three-point shooter for Savidis. Really high three-point volume as well, good free throws. Overall, his field goal percentage wasn't strong. Defensive stats weren't quite there for Savidis, but a guy who's got that ability to shoot, which is what so many teams are after, and I think there's some good utility in him. But the lack of overall defensive stats, really low assist percentage is somewhat of a concern. Efficiency pretty strong, but it's all about getting those other numbers in there, and Savidis probably doesn't have as much upside in that area as other players do. Number 38, a guy that was picked significantly later than this in the actual NBA draft, and that's Tremont Waters, going to the Boston Celtics, a 2-year guard out of LSU, averaged 15 points with 6 assists and almost 3 steals last season. And of course, those 3 steals per game really get me peaked, get me interested. Anyone who can come in, and his freshman season, he averaged 2 steals per game as well. That's really, really interesting to have guys put up steal numbers at that level. The advanced stuff pretty strong, an 8.2 box score plus minus for Waters last season. Now he's not a big guard by any stretch, but putting up a positive PIPM into the defensive side of things, overall a really strong PIPM as well as a 5'11 guard. That's impressive. a strong assist percentage. Efficiency probably does, well not probably, definitely does need some work. A true shooting of under 56% in both of his seasons, but a pretty high usage. And this Celtics team could be looking for guards. We know they drafted Carson Edwards. We don't know if Rozier or Kyrie will be back. Odds are that probably both of them aren't back, but we don't know that at this point. Then you're left with Marcus Smart. You've got Carson Edwards there as well. I think Waters he'll play some rotation minutes this season, and I think in a couple of years he could actually develop into a pretty strong second round pick who, if he was a starter for a year or two in the NBA, I wouldn't be completely surprised. And there is a little bit of fantasy value in someone like Tremont Waters with that high steal rate, with that pretty good assist rate, with a decent scoring number, and I think the efficiency can improve as well. So I do like Tremont Waters there. Number 37, we're going into a bunch of undrafted players here, but as I said in, I think yesterday's show or the show before, so many of the guys that were undrafted, I think, have a lot more value than some of the guys picked in the second round, and there are three guys who really stand out here, and one of them that we're looking at here is Justin Robinson, who ended up signing a guaranteed deal with the Washington Wizards. He played 4 years with Virginia Tech, so that 4-year, I guess the age does take him down a bit. 6'2" point guard. In his senior season, averaged 13.5 points with 5 assists and 1.6 steals. Shot 42% from 3, shot 40% from 3 the year before. A little bit surprising that he didn't get drafted, but a good steal rate, a good assist rate, pretty decent efficiency numbers from Robinson as well, on a Wizards team that at the moment their point guards are John Wall, out for the season, and Tomas Satoransky, a restricted free agent, and the other guy there is Chasen Randall. So Robinson, on a guaranteed deal as an unrestricted or an undrafted free agent, could come in and actually play rotation minutes straight away. I think that out of the 3 players the Wizards acquired, or the main 3 guys they acquired, Admiral Schofield, Rui Hachimura, and Justin Robinson, as I talked about with Brian Schroeder on yesterday's podcast, Robinson has a chance to be the best of that lot, which is saying something as an undrafted rookie. The next guy is another undrafted rookie, and that's Jalen Lecque, who signed a 4-year deal with the Phoenix Suns after the draft, an undrafted player, 2 of those years guaranteed. So that's a pretty strong indication that they value Lecque as an option. Now, didn't play in college last season, was going to be going to, I believe, NC State, but with reclassification, was able to enter this draft. The only sort of stats we've got from him, he played in a Nike Under-17 tournament last season, according to Real GM, 14 points with 4 boards and 4 assists. Shot 11% on threes, which is a little bit concerning, but that's his AAU numbers. And there's not a lot to look at there with those numbers across those games. So he's a tough one to get a full read on, but with someone like Anthony Simons in a similar sort of boat to what Lecque is, a super athletic guard is Jalen Lecque. And we know Phoenix is just consistently looking at point guards. They picked up about 4 of them at the moment. Lecque is a guy to watch. He's probably not going to have an impact at all this season with DeAnthony Melton, who I still believe is the best point guard on that team, outside of Devin Booker, of course. Ali Okobo, Tyler Johnson, Ty Jerome, who they brought in as well, and they could be looking at more in free agency. But Lecque's a guy with some significant upside. Just getting to that level is the challenge, I guess, for him. Whether he can actually make it to that spot, we don't know that at this point. My most interesting, or probably the most excited guy I am as a undrafted free agent, is John Conchar out of Purdue Fort Wayne, a senior there. Now his numbers, look, they're just right across the board fantastic. 19.5 points, great. 8.5 rebounds, love it. 5.5 assists, 2 steals, a block, 38% three-point shooting. In fact, over his college career, he shot 42% from 3 on 3.5 attempts per game. He shot 63% on 2-pointers as well, and 70% on his free throws. The numbers are super strong. Advanced numbers absolutely out the wazoo for John Conchar, a guy who the advanced stats really like. Now, defensively, even though he did generate some steals and blocks, it's not to say that he was a great defender by any means, but these statistics that he put up were absolutely encouraging, and he's someone I'd be happy to take a flyer on. Conchar is a 6'5" guard, so he's got some decent size. The defensive stuff does need some work, but his ability to rebound, pass, get steals, shoot the ball well are really strong indicators for a player to at least become a rotation guy. This Grizzlies team needs players who can contribute. At the moment, where you're looking at Tyler Dorsey, you've got Avery Bradley, who won't be there. You've got Dylan Brooks, who's okay but not spectacular in that 2-guard position. Concha, absolutely, as an undrafted guy, is someone who could fight his way into a consistent role with the Grizzlies team, and I think be a relatively productive player. His history would definitely point in that direction as well. The next guy we look at, Carson Edwards from Purdue, went to the Boston Celtics, and I've got him at number 34 on my list here, right around the spot he was drafted. Obviously a very undersized guard, much like their other second-round pick, Tremont Waters. He's listed as 6'1". I reckon that's a little bit generous. Played 3 seasons for Purdue. Last season really exploded, especially in the tournament. 24 points per game, only 3 assists, 1.3 steals, but his usage was absolutely really huge. He had to do so much for this team. He posted a true shooting of just 54%, but the usage of 37%, he's never going to have that usage in the NBA. The year before, as a sophomore, he had a usage of 30, and that true shooting was able to maintain it around 60% because he wasn't taking as many ludicrous shots that he had to last season. So I think that when we look at it and go, well, he was only a 36% three-point shooter, only shot 44% on twos. So much of that for Carson Edwards was due to the fact that he was taking these shots because nobody else could take them. On an NBA team, that's not going to be the case for Edwards. So while we do have to have a little bit of a worry that the efficiency is not there, I don't think it's going to be as bad as that. The low assist rate is probably more troubling, but I think he can be a high-volume three-point guy who can score. Again, the Celtics need guards, and they need guys who can contribute. Can he get that assist rate up? I'm a little bit dubious about him ever becoming a high-level facilitator. But that ability to score is obviously interesting, and he's not going to have to shoulder as large of a load
Giggity!
as what he did as a member of the Purdue Boilermakers. So Carson Edwards, a really strong second-round pick, a guy that can just help offensively, bring in some scoring, and if he finds himself in a rotation role, could actually impact 16, 18-team fantasy leagues this season just from three-point volume and scoring alone. If he came in and averaged 10 points and 1.8 threes per game in his rookie season, I don't think that would be too much of a surprise, with a little bit of room to grow and get better. The number 19 pick in the NBA draft was Luka Samanic of the San Antonio Spurs. I've got him number 33 on my board. I didn't like the pick of Samanic there at number 19. Again, we like to give the benefit of the doubt to Spurs guys, rightfully so. But I'm just not sure overall about where Samanic comes in as an overall dynasty player. A strong rebound rate. The shooting's not there, and there is room for that to develop. But I think what's going to hold him back is overall a lack of defensive numbers. That's going to be the concern that holds him back from being a strong fantasy guy. 0.5 steals and 0.4 blocks in 18 minutes per game. 8 points per game. 34% shooting from 3. 5 boards, which isn't too bad, the 5 boards. So he's a decently strong rebounder. But still, he's not quite there as that international prospect, but did show big improvements at the combine, an increase in strength, an ability to take guys and attack closeouts, use his dribble, put it on the floor, move around. Defensively, he's not atrocious, but he's not going to generate those defensive stats, which of course is what we're looking at for fantasy. Not much of a passer as well. But there is upside in Samanic. I just didn't think that he was worth that number 19 pick overall, and I don't think you should be looking at him as a number 19 pick in dynasty leagues. At number 32, we're looking at another big man, and that is the Clippers trading back into the draft to grab Mfiondu Kabengele out of Florida State. Some concern with Kabengele coming in with the knee injuries. He wore braces on his knees pretty much all season. Apparently that checked out to be okay, and there's no issue there, but we still have some concerns. A relative, I think he's a nephew of Dikembe Mutombo as well. Some strong defensive numbers from Kabengele. Last season, he averaged 13 and 6 with 1.5 blocks. He actually extended out and started taking some threes as well. Shot 37% from 3 out there, which is obviously an encouraging number. Defensively, some strong PIPM metrics there as well. Doesn't really ever project to be a starting caliber center, I don't believe, but decent enough free throw percentage. Can hit the 3, can score a bit, can block some shots. Montrezl Harrell is there at the moment with the Clippers, but Kabengele could, we know that rosters change so much. Kabengele could come in, be a backup or a 20-minute guy to a Harrell's 27-minute guy, depending on what they do if it's a Zubats as well. Not saying this season for Kabengele, I don't think he's going to do that this year. But coming in, being a 20-minute a game guy, being a starter, he's 6'10", from Canada as well. So many Canadians drafted in this draft. Good block rate, needs to work a little bit on efficiency numbers overall, but that three-point shooting is absolutely encouraging, especially considering that he did increase his volume in his second season at Florida State. Didn't start at all, which is, I guess, marginally concerning. Only played 22 minutes a night, but still averaging 13 and 6 in 22 minutes with 1.5 blocks is pretty good value on the per minute basis. Number 31 on my Dynasty rookie ranks is a back-end first-round pick of the Cleveland Cavaliers, Dylan Windler, a guy that played for Belmont and put up some pretty strong numbers during his time at Belmont. The level of competition that he faced isn't as great as many other players, but really, much like John Conchar that I mentioned earlier, Windler was able to put up some really strong numbers and converted fantastically well in my initial fantasy translations. Rebounded well, good steals, super efficient, good three-point volume, high usage, high scorer. Averaged 21 and 11 last season with 1.4 steals, 2.5 assists as well. Shot 43% from three for 2 consecutive seasons and shot 40% in his sophomore season as well. Ludicrous 2-point percentage, 67% on twos across his college career, 76% free throw shooter as well. Defensively, Windler needs some work. He's a 6'8 wing player. Strong rebounder, probably never going to rebound at that sort of a level in the NBA, but can he come in and challenge a guy like Chetty Osman? Can he play alongside Chetty Osman if Kevin Love moves up to the 5? I think there's possibilities for that. He's a little bit, he's an older player, obviously, as a 4-year college guy, but I think that Windler has that knack of putting up numbers which can be really, really useful for fantasy leagues. And Windler's translations, the high three volume, the high rebound volume, the steals, the efficiency, the scoring, that's all really interesting, and it should give you some level of interest in him. The reason I have him actually lower than his draft score is I'm just not ever sure he can translate that into a big enough role. And while we can talk about per minute guys all the time, much like with Conchar, we can look at that and go, that's great, but will we ever see them is there any upside for them to become 30-minute starters? And I'm just not sure there is for Windler. I could very much be wrong with him on this one, and if he does find himself in a larger role, then he really does skyrocket up this list with his ability to put up numbers in bulk, as we talked about. At number 30, one of the biggest reaches in the entire draft, Cam Johnson of the Phoenix Suns. He was picked at number 11 in the draft. I've got him at number 30. Obviously the oldest player drafted, concerns with hip and back injuries during his career that apparently had him red flagged by many teams, but he can come in and be a 3-point shooter. He can come in and be an efficient guy. That's all really strong, and that has its own fantasy value. There's no doubt about that. But will he ever be able to stay or get on the court and play that 30-minute role, much like Windler? Averaged 17 points per game as a senior last season, but like so many guys, what did he do in those first couple of seasons, or even as a junior? 12 points as a junior in 29 minutes a game, 34% shooting. Why was he only able to dominate when he was 38 years old as a fifth-year senior? That's what gives you that level of concern. He really bumped his steal rate up last season. His rebounds increased as well, and that three-point shooting went up. Now, to be fair to him, in his last season at Pitt, because he did transfer from Pitt to UNC, he was a 42% three-point shooter, and then down to 34 with the Tar Heels in his first year there, then up to 46 last season, and he's been a very strong free throw shooter through his entire college career. I just don't really see it long-term for Cam Johnson. Maybe I'm being a little bit harsh on him here, and he can work himself into a regular 25, 27-minute-a-night role and hit 2.4 threes, much like the Duke Wayne Ellington, be that sort of a player, which of course has fantasy utilization, but long-term, is there any upside in Cam Johnson? That's where I guess I get concerned with him. At number 29, I went with Romeo Langford, picked by the Celtics at number 14. Really horrible fantasy translations from Langford. Had those torn thumb ligaments, which did impact his shot, but he wasn't a guy that ever was thought to have a really strong shot to begin with. So I don't think that, and while I think that there is no doubt the thumb injury had an impact on his shot, I don't think it was the full story of why he shot just 27% from three. A strong finisher at the rim. Not a guy who can generate assists, an okay rebounder, steal rate not that great. Block rate is pretty interesting for Langford, but the overall poor free throw shooting is a concern as well. I look at him as very similar to a current Celtics guy, Jaylen Brown, who really struggles from a fantasy point of view, and Langford has those similar concerns: poor free throw shooting, poor three-point shooting, lack of rebounds and assists, lowish type steal numbers. They are all the concerns I have for Langford, so I'm not massively into him. I don't think that he's necessarily going to become a starter in the NBA. At number 28, I'm going with the Bulls' second round selection of Daniel Gafford. Another one of these players, and it's very common with big men, who can do enough stuff in limited minutes to be fantasy relevant. And Gafford can do that. Rebounding, score at a high efficiency rate, high field goal percentage, solid block numbers. I don't ever think that Gafford is going to be a 30-minute-a-night player, but he can be that, maybe not Montrezl Harrell type minutes, but a 22 type minute guy who can block enough shots, have enough of an impact in field goal percentage, rebound the ball enough to at least have some sort of utilization in fantasy leagues. It was a big step back for Gafford, who thought he could be almost a lottery pick if he had have come out after his freshman season. That wasn't to be. He went back to school and sort of plateaued, and that overall impacted his draft stock coming out. But in saying that, he plateaued, but he did average 17 points as opposed to 12 points as a sophomore versus a freshman. The block rate did decrease significantly, which is a bit of a concern. Hasn't taken any threes at all in his college career, and defensively, his defensive metrics did drop off a bit. But I think there is a bit to like here. Not that I don't think he's ever going to be a starter in Chicago because Wendell Carter Jr. is there, but he can play himself into a larger role. He could get traded to another team. I think there's enough upside in Gafford, especially from a fantasy point of view, to look at him at there. Terrible English. At number 27, I am looking at Rui Hachimura of the Washington Wizards. Just a horrible pick, I thought, at pick number 9 for the Wizards. It made no sense to select him that high. I worry about what he's going to be able to do in the NBA. Super productive numbers in college. No one's doubting that. 3 years at Gonzaga. Started for the first time last year. 30 minutes, 20 points, 6.5 points. Low steals, low blocks, doesn't pass. Shot 42% on threes, yes. Attempted 1 per game, just not enough. And prior to that, he'd shot 19% from 3 the year before, 29 the year before that. Overall, he's a 32% three-point shooter in college on 0.7 attempts per game. I don't see how he is an effect. Now, the thing with Hachimura is, with the way the Wizards roster is set up, if Jabari Parker's not coming back, if Bobby Portis isn't coming back, look, I think he's almost definitely in the rotation from night one, and he could be starting at some point this season. That doesn't mean he's necessarily going to be good. I don't think he's going to be able to score with the same ease that he had in college, and he just doesn't have any of those other peripherals. The three-point shot is a worry for him to be a long-term good fantasy prospect. I feel like there are guys where I'm ranking them low, where I go, there's a decent chance I'm wrong on this. I don't feel that with Hachimura, but I do think that he's probably going to have a better rookie season than a few of the guys who are listed with a higher rank than him, and that could skew the opinion of Hachimura, which to me, in that case, if you do end up with him in a Dynasty League after this, he is a prime candidate to be best season ever is his rookie season, the Jordan Clarkson Memorial Award. The Timothé Luwawu-Cabarrot Memorial Award. I think that could be a situation for Hachimura just with the way the Wizards roster is shaping up. If Jeff Green doesn't return,
my name is Jeff.
There's big opportunities for Rui, and they obviously believe in him, and I think that's somewhat misguided, but that's a possibility. I just don't believe in his defense. I don't actually believe in his offense. I'm not sure the three-point shot ever develops, and I don't like him as a fantasy prospect. At number 26, this is really just an upside play. Darius Bazley of the Oklahoma City Thunder didn't play last season, played for New Balance. Was an intern with New Balance instead. Guy who was going to go to the G League, never ended up doing that. 6'9" wing who showed a lot of shooting upside in his pre-draft workouts. I think just that size, the potential that with the size and wingspan to generate some steals, be an okay rebounder, to score and shoot, gives him upside. But this is purely an upside play. And he could be an absolute disaster as a fantasy and NBA player. I think there's a real possibility of that. But I do like the upside pick there at number 26 for Darius Bazley. At number 25, another second round center. Number 31 pick was Nick Claxton of the Nets. Claxton shows some real ability with the ball in his hands. A guy that looks like one of those players. I actually don't know this, but anyone might want to correct me. He looks like one of those guys who was a point guard and then had a real size burst that shot up really tall, and that made him play center. He's able to take the ball to the rack, pretty strongly. Put the ball on the floor. Got some okay dribble moves for a guy his size coming out of Georgia as a 6'11" center. Averaged 13 and 9 with 2.5 blocks. Actually took the ball out to three-point land. Now, took 2 threes a game, only hit 28% of them, but the encouragement there is in that volume that Claxton was able to shoot. pretty strong defensive metrics as well for Claxton, and I do think that he does have that fantasy upside. Now, the efficiency stuff really has to improve for him. I think the three-point shot can become reliable. I think that the block numbers are interesting, and I think that we are going to see some big improvements from Claxton. And you're coming behind Jared Allen. He's probably not going to have a huge impact this season. Ed Davis is gone, though, so we might see him pushing in. The Nets have a lot of decisions to make in free agency, and depending on which direction they want to go. But I do like Claxton there as a bit of an upside center play. The next one, we're looking at pick number 24. I didn't particularly like the Miami Heat's pick of Tyler Herro, and I've spelt his name wrong on that graphic. That's disappointing. At number 24 there for the Heat, but I think we've got to have a look at him as an option here when we're looking at Dynasty drafts. A guy that showed an ability to shoot, obviously didn't really miss any free throws at all during his time in Kentucky, and we love giving the benefit of the doubt to Kentucky players with an ability to increase their game or to do more with the ball. Can he ever be a guy that runs pick and roll? I'm not really confident in him doing that. I think he's going to be a strong shooter. I think that he's going to be able to at least generate steals at a decent enough level, but the defense is not great from him. It's not horrible, but it's not great. And will he ever be I don't think his game is diverse enough, and he's never going to be a strong driver to really take advantage of that very high free throw percentage, which really is going to drive fantasy value. So while Herro was picked pretty high, I think he's got a chance to be, and he should be a rotation guy pretty early on for the Heat. I'm just not sure that all that much comes of it for him. At number 23, you've got Ty Jerome of the Phoenix Suns. He was picked number 24 in the overall draft. I'm not a massive fan of that move for the Suns to get Jerome. I still think DeAnthony Melton's the perfect guy to play alongside with Devin Booker if that's the direction you want to go. But Jerome is a big point guard, so that does help him. I believe he's like 6'5" and a half. Coming as a 3-year guy coming out of Virginia, a 6'5" guard who averaged 13.5 points. But the thing that which gives him interest from a fantasy point of view is the assist rate, 5.5 assists per game, 1.5 steals, 40% three-point shooter. So there are some pretty strong indicators that he could be a useful type player from a fantasy point of view. Anyone who can get to 4-5 assists per game, or 4.5 assists even in a backup role, is absolutely immediately interesting. And I don't think Jerome ever is going to develop into a starting caliber point guard, although many point guards can be found in this area of the real NBA draft. There are enough indicators there to make me at least have a bit of a flyer pick on Ty Jerome. At number 22, this is a complete flyer, and that's Kevin Porter Jr., who went to the Cavs. The fit with Cleveland is going to be really interesting with Jordan Clarkson, with Colin Sexton, with Darius Garland. There's so many guys that need the ball in their hand. I'm not convinced that Porter can ever play effective NBA basketball or winning NBA basketball. Will he be able to be humbled enough to at least pass the ball somewhat? Athleticism is crazy. Step over moves, step backs, crossovers, all that sort of stuff. Two-footed leaping ability is massive for Porter, but can he do enough in those other areas to stay on the court? Will he pass? That's a question. Will he defend? I've got no idea at this point. We didn't see much of any of this from Porter, who barely played really during his time at USC, with that suspension coming in and being an issue. Some really horrible advanced numbers as well. That lack of passing, that lack of sort of feel outside of a one-on-one game is a concern. The piss poor free throw shooting is massively concerning. 50% on free throws during his time at USC should be, it's a worry, but he also shot 40% from three. So 50% from the line, 40% from three. When you look at it, you've got to think of which one of these is real. And that's, I guess, the concern when we're looking at Kevin Porter. But the upside is there for him to be a solid enough scorer that is going to give us some value. But just, my concerns of where that all comes around or how that comes around is I think that's well founded. The next guy we look at, and the last guy we're going to talk about today, is one of the biggest fallers in the draft, and that, of course, is Bol Bol from Oregon, who now is a member of the Denver Nuggets after being selected by the Miami Heat. His fantasy translations are unbelievable. Yeah, this is a guy that blocks shots, that shoots super efficient, that hits threes, that can score, that can rebound. All this stuff looks great. In his 9 games, he averaged 21 and 10 with 2.7 blocks, shooting 52% from 3. Now, of course, that's ridiculously small sample size. 13 of 25 from 3, but he is a real shooter. This guy is a massive shooter, but Can he be healthy enough to stay on the court? Does he want to stay on the court? Where is his commitment to the game? Is it there as much as some other people? There are real concerns, but if it pans out for Bol, this is why I have him at 21, because he was picked way lower than this at number 44. But if it pans out, this is a guy that in 27 minutes a night is a comfortable top 70 player. The chances of him getting to 27 minutes a night appear really, really low. But if he gets there, and I've got him ahead of those other centers like Claxton, who was picked ahead of him, like Gafford, who was picked ahead of him. But the upside for Bol is just so much higher than those guys as a real shot blocking, scoring, rebounding, efficient, three-point shooting, 7'2" big man. It's super interesting. But there's a real reason that he fell to pick number 44, much like Porter falling to pick 30. There's a reason for those things happening. And from what I've heard, that the injury concern with Bol is not the major reason why he fell. So that does give you a decent level of pause. Plus, we're dealing with this really small sample size with Oregon. But I think you've got to take a flyer on him, at least in this sort of range in your Dynasty rookie drafts. That'll wrap it up looking at number 40 through to number 21 in my Dynasty rankings. Tomorrow we'll be back to do 20 through to number 1. I'm sure you all know who number 1 is. Follow me on Twitter at redrock_bball. Let me know your criticisms, comments, thoughts on the way these rankings pan out. Which guys have I got too high? Which guys have I got too low? See if you can guess my top 5 in terms of Dynasty ranks as well. That would be interesting if you could do that. Subscribe to this podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and on YouTube. Give me a thumbs up, leave a comment, 5-star ratings, all that good stuff. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Monk.